morning, everyone, or afternoon, as the case may be. I'm the last Omnitect, your favorite robot American, and welcome to another session of OMNI Draws. And today we're going to be theming it specifically after my TTRPG, which... sorry about that. You gotta know, sometimes you gotta keep the YouTube video open in the back. We're gonna theme this session of OMNI Draws after Legacy First Flight, my faster-than-light TTRPG, which I've been working on as an indie TTRPG pretty much by myself for the better part of 20 years. Besides my incredible playtesters, who've been a combination of my friends and companions, it's pretty much been nothing but me at the helm. And one of the perks of being an artist is you also get to draw everything. So, let's pop in very fast. Good morning, everybody. Of course, the camera worked fine a minute ago. There we are. Ah, perfect. Good morning, everybody. Wouldn't be a live stream if we didn't have some technical issues. So, let's get things started. Looks like our music is properly looping. If anyone has any questions about what the music is, you can actually check it out inside the video description. All of them are listed there, where you can find them, direct links to them, or at very least, the name and the creator. Please go give support to your awesome creators. They really do help make everything possible, especially those out there who are creating free music for people to use. The folks out there who do royalty-free music are incredible and they deserve all your affection. Especially right now, I gotta shout out Scott Buckley, who right now we're listening to his music, specifically the song Absolution. A beautiful piece if you want to have a soft, somber night or like moment in your TTRPG. Speaking of supporting your fellow TTRPG creators, I gotta shout out my incredible patrons, Ampersand, Atlas, and Heinrich. You all are incredible at my Tier 1 and Tier 2, Necronomulus and Souls rolls. You guys are incredible. I wouldn't be able to produce my content without these folks. I am right now still a solo act, and I gotta tell you, it's frustrating at times. But having you guys out there supporting me even a little bit makes it significantly more doable. So thank you to everyone who's currently out there. Believe you me, you make things much better on me. So, let's pop over to the art and get to it. As my camera continues to do that thing where it just doesn't want to turn on unless I restart it. There we go. Alright, so for those of you who've been following my Legacy First Flight setting and the Legacy First Flight work I've been doing, first off, I've got an actual session of it this coming weekend. So if you are interested in seeing the game and how it plays, this Saturday at 1:30 Eastern Standard Time. Again, that is Saturday, 1:30 Eastern Standard Time on my Unicorn Head Studios channel. That's where you're going to be able to find it. And if you're wondering where the Unicorn Studios channel is, you can find it in my channel description. Just click on that and it'll be right there, youtube.com/@UnicornHeadStudios. So, let's get to it. Normally I like to warm up before I start drawing, but today I didn't really have a chance. It's been kind of a morning of exceptions and catching up with things, which I think is instructive for a lot of folks out there who create art, which is that unfortunately, art doesn't wait for you to have free time. You kind of got to do what you got to do when you got to do it. So, I've been drawing these guys for a while. This particular one here is actually, if I can make sure I got this right, here we go. So this is technically a zero-out squad member. So the zero-out squads are the lethal martial aspect of the big fascist enemy in my setting. So, there are many existential threats to the galaxy in Legacy First Flight. It's a galaxy that is largely at peace, much like our universe is, or at least our world per se is. We're not in a world war, though we are in many battles at the moment, and many of them are struggles. Especially for those of you who are struggling for your rights in the US, struggling survival in Palestine, struggling against invasion in Ukraine, struggling against a million factors. We all know the poor and everywhere suffer. But Legacy isn't a perfect utopia. It's a world that's a little bit better than ours, and science fiction. That was kind of my whole arc of it. But I do want to have some things still recognizable. And I don't believe I'd be doing justice to my setting if I didn't accept that we still will face many of the same struggles that we face now in the future. So we're going to go through here. We're just going to delete all these, because this is kind of how I go through everything. Nice. Alright. So we got ourselves our base silhouette. Let's get to our gesso layer and get to it. Okay. So one of the biggest threats in Legacy at the moment is a faction known as the Imperial Resurgent. So, in various instances of the past, in pretty much actually not various, specifically about 2,000 years ago in my setting, there was a species known as the Anizali. The Anizali used to be the dominant hegemon of the galaxy, and not a pleasant one. Theirs was an imperial peace, a ruthless brutality enforced through violence. They basically operated a galaxy-wide ethno-state, and it was not a good place to live. However, a catastrophe hit the galaxy. A species by the name of the Ataraxi Scourge emerged from the Rim, and being nothing like the other sapient species of the galaxy, rolled over them, consuming their technology and their worlds. It nearly annihilated the Anizali, and it did annihilate almost every other species that existed in that era. As of now, only a few Anizali from that era remain. A species that once numbered in the billions and trillions, now in only a few million of them, across an entire galaxy. The name of that faction, of that ancient empire, is the Imperial, the Anizali Imperial. Most Anizali are the surviving children of that empire, the refugees, those who saw the seeds that were planted by their parents bloom into devastation and destruction. Most Anizali don't want to replicate the Imperial. They live now in a significantly more honest galaxy. It's not perfect, but the Union has equal partnership amongst its 8 species. And the Anizali are, for the most part, not directly represented by their own choice. They instead usually fill an advisory role. However, there are some who look back on the Imperial with no small amount of whimsy and nostalgia. A time of stability, a time of peace, a time of strength. And for those who feel disadvantaged, those who are cast to the wind, the call of fascism is a dangerous siren song. And thus we have the Imperial Resurgent. The galaxy is vast. Truly, truly vast. There are no such things as a fully explored solar system, or even a fully explored world. There's always places we're still finding, even on just our planet. And even hundreds of years into the future, as Legacy is set 400 years from now, with galaxy-spanning empires and populations numbering in the trillions across the galaxy, it's impossible to chart every star, to settle every place. The edge of the galaxy is still being slowly expanded into. And it's there, amidst the dark of the stars that have yet to be discovered, in the free marches, far away from the Union's jurisdiction, that these fascists have begun to slowly lay their roots, hidden amongst those who went out for far more earnest purposes. Corporations seeking to exploit resources where no one else will protest. People seeking to build civilizations and new beginnings, free from the baggage of their old worlds and lives. People just wanting to be free, to be peaceful, to be quiet. And in these free marches, in these populations of those already pushed to the fringes of galactic society, fascism, unfortunately, has begun to take root. The Imperial has laid dormant for who knows how long. Its roots are beginning to strangle the Avanti sector, a very small part of the galaxy, only now coming into focus of the Galactic Union's eyes. So here we are, with this rising fascist force. I have a couple of things about the Anazali Imperiale that sort of hold true no matter what. They aren't the Anazali. Their technology isn't hyper-advanced in the same way that other empires might be. Instead, they're people. They come from many walks of life. It isn't just humans or Anazali who are members of the Imperial Resurgent. After all, fascism calls to anyone who can be appealed to through violence. No, that's not what we're dealing with here. Instead, what we're dealing with, and I will pull this guy a little higher up, so we can see just how tall a human is to scale. Let's push them a little higher up. That'll do. And let's go and grab our text and move that down a little bit. That'll do nicely. Okay. We can grab our Jess and pull this down. The Imperiale draws from all species of the galaxy. There are 8 sapient species. All of them are playable in Legacy. I don't believe in the idea of a species that's only meant to be observed. If they're self-aware and they can negotiate, they should be capable of it. You should be playing them, or have at least the option of it. It's one of the things I was very careful about when I was first working on Legacy. I didn't want to do what Dungeons & Dragons had done for so many years, which is create these empires and these peoples that you're not allowed to play. It always felt inherently wrong in some way. Not quite cheating, but it always feels like it leads to disaster when you're talking about designing something. As a rule of thumb, when you're drawing, like, when you're writing a book or drawing a webcomic or something, you can have certain outsiders. That's not beyond the pale of what's reasonable. But you need to be careful of the subtext. When you're playing a TTRPG game, especially many of the more common styles of TTRPG, the adventure-heavy TTRPG, I find a lot of creators run into the issue that I find in a lot of pulp fiction. Nothing wrong with some type of pulp fiction, but 9 times out of 10 pulp fiction tends to trade in some really, really toxic tropes. The idea is that there are some people who just need to be saved. There are some people who are born to it. That ancient empires hold the answer to all our problems. It's a dangerous game to play, especially now. Now, I'm a firm believer that everyone has a right to enjoy what they wish, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody. But as an artist, I think anyone who says that and doesn't pay attention... And let's turn the white gesso on so we can see what I'm drawing here a little more clearly, so I can see what I'm drawing more clearly. I feel like if anyone does that and doesn't pay attention to the subtext of what they're writing, they're being irresponsible with what they're making, in my opinion. That's where we end up with orcs that everyone hates on for 30, 40 years. That's how we end up with the concept of quote-unquote races, as D&D loves to peddle them. And the incredibly toxic stuff where the implication is some species are just naturally good at certain things. That's really vile, actually. I don't think that holds true. And I understand there are some that are like, oh yeah, well, you know, a Wookiee's gonna be stronger than a person. Yes, and then we saw where that went in Star Wars. Wookiees got turned into slave labor. They became an allegory at best for exploited peoples, or, you know, just a cheap gag for they're stronger than us, usually. What was the bit that R2-D2 and C-3PO said? Where it's something along the lines of, you know, it's not... Well, let the Wookiee win, right? Well, you know, that's great, but most Wookiees aren't going to rip your arms off. And I feel like when we're talking about science fiction, especially science fiction, but fantasy too, like all TTRPGs, you're spending a large amount of time in a TTRPG. Even if it's a one-shot, you're going to spend significantly more time playing even... Unless it's like a ludicrously fast game. Like, insanely fast. Almost more of a board game than it is a TTRPG. You're going to spend a lot of time in that. And during that time, the world will influence you. Pretending it won't is wrong-headed. You can say someone has agency, you know, and the ability to decide things, but... Guys, if you spend, like, 100 hours playing a video game, it's gonna start coloring your, you know, your perception. It's gonna start coloring how you enjoy or see the world around you. It's boss baby syndrome, right? You know, if the first movie you've ever watched is Boss Baby, and people introduce it as Boss Baby, then everything you see is going to sound or look like Boss Baby. That's not good. Alright. So, I'm just sort of drawing out a silhouette here. That arm is a little too thick, so I'm going to thicken this one out to match. There we go. Now, I feel like the same thing happens when you're playing in a game like a TTRPG, where a large part of your time is going to be spent in this place. You're going to be interacting with imaginary figures and creatures. You're going to be making a world for your friends to hang out in and enjoy. So I think it's important for those who create TTRPGs, who set the bones of these worlds, to think about what you're communicating. It is art. And while art should be given the space to grow, a responsible artist should acknowledge they have some kind of responsibility to those who would read or watch, to not screw with the heads of the people that are enjoying their stuff. At least not too much. You're allowed to help open someone's mind, but if you're, you know, indoctrinating them to some really disgusting stuff, that's a bit of a problem. At least in my mind. This is why I've sort of arrived where I have with the Anazali Imperial. I don't want to create a perfect empire. I don't want to create these super competent fascists. That's not what I want to do. I've seen so much of that. How many times do we see, you know, the Nazis in Indiana Jones depicted as these erudite scholars that are entirely too clever, short-sighted, overly ambitious maybe, but they're usually given a lot more credit than they deserve. IMO. You know, reduce the size of that helmet a little bit. It's a little too thick, dare I say. There we go. I'm going to save this. Good. A little better. Beautiful. Okay, now we've got parity with what we want. So I wanted to, when I started working on the Imperial, sort of make a bomb to that. I wanted to address them as what they are. People. And I think that's a dangerous thing for a lot of folks. A lot of people, when they see fascism, when they see this kind of thing depicted, they fall into one of two camps. They either make them hyper competent. I mean, like, super ridiculously, like, these guys are insanely competent in a way that's not realistic. Or they make them goofballs, right? They make them into giant turbo dorks. Which, for the record, most, I would say that's a more realistic depiction, but is still off. You see, the truth of the matter is, those people who would go through the trouble of establishing an entire government specifically to screw with people, they're not usually dumb. Short-sighted, yes. Cruel, yes. Arrogant, assholes, generally just not good people. Oh, all these things. I am not glazing these guys. But I do believe that we now live in an era where this is now so common a problem, we really shouldn't be underselling the people that would want to do violence against us. We shouldn't be trying to make them into jokes. They're not. They have to be taken seriously. Both on their perspective, they want to be taken seriously, which we shouldn't, like, accommodate them. But the threat they pose is so grave that to pretend that they're just a cheap gag, that's not very accurate either. And since Legacy is built on the premise of us having a world not too dissimilar from our own, I also wanted to go out of my way to make sure that I depict these guys as what I think they are. They're people. Misled, dangerous people. It doesn't mean they don't deserve a bullet. I'm not going to do that. That is not a way I'm going to go. But I do want to make it very clear to my players and people who pick up my world that these guys might be victims to a certain extent. Manipulated, screwed with, misled. But they're still perpetrating very real harm. And they should be taken very seriously. So I have a couple of design motifs that I always stick with when I'm working with the Imperial. First off, almost all the Imperial have this very cleavery kind of armor. It's sharp, jagged, in certain ways. Not always, mind you. As an example, we can pop over to the deep cover folks. And some of the armor is rounded, padded, that kind of thing. We'll get to that. But there's always this sharpened knife motif that I use. They're an edge. They're designed to sever things. In this case, they're severing our connections to what makes us good people. So they'll almost always have this jagged helmet. That's one. Two, their technology is not the same as the Imperial. They utilize parts of it, but that's not all they do. As I open this up and pull this to the side. Now, I've shown you guys Imperial characters and Anazali heroes and such before. They have a very distinctive aesthetic. It's very hard to miss. This is an Anazali hero, one of the few sketches I did way back in the day. And Anazali heroes have this very specific motif of this super elegant technology. They're really powerful, really dangerous, and beautiful in a terrible kind of way. Should have an actual picture of this. You'll have to pardon me, there's an ant just climbing up the wall right in front of me. I'm just sort of staring at it like, oh, I wish I had a napkin nearby to smash you. A moment. I unfortunately need to do terrible things to this poor ant. Just a moment. We're back. Thank you guys for your patience. So, In terms of how the Anazali's like ancient technology feeds into their modern like aesthetic, they do have certain elements of this like super futuristic ancient technology that they utilize, but really they're just like normal people nowadays. They're bootstrapping this ancient legacy, which was not that great in the first place. Just gonna put that out there. General rule of thumb, kind of shit, kind of bad people. So as a result, they sort of just bootstrap existing technology now. Onto their gear and equipment. That's where we got into the other... Let me just close this here. That's sort of what you can see a little bit with the other agent. I'm going to rotate him so you can see him a little more square on. So you can see here, this Zero Out team member, he's using very human-esque tech. He's using flak armor. He's using metal plating that's been hammered very realistically. He's using belt buckles, and even though he's using advanced technology like a cybernetic harness to keep himself physically upright and to bear more of his weight, you can see muscle fibers and cabling going around his abdomen. All that's recognizable technology, though. This guy isn't using the super advanced ancient tech. Instead, hold on, there we go. Instead, this guy is using just like modern gear and equipment. Boots Battlefield 2032. Okay. So I'm borrowing like certain elements from near future settings, not unlike Battlefield 2042 or like Titanfall, stuff like that, to sort of combine these elements together to create a more lived-in, practical sort of gear set. Alright, found a little bit of concept art here that I'm going to be using on the side. Perfect. Now that said, I do also want to keep these guys as cloaked as possible. Literally, cloaked as possible. So we're going to be going with thicker armor and gear over this. I'm going to have a second gesso layer on this. I normally don't do this. So gesso, cloak. I'm going to put this at like a 50% opacity, just so I can sort of see it. Okay. So I like the idea that these guys have like some kind of rain slickery sort of stuff on. Makes them look a little bit more intimidating, breaks up their silhouette. My goal is to make an adversary that's imminently shootable. We've all heard the joke, right? You know, someone with a punchable face. Well, these guys are fascists. They're not good guys. You're not meant to negotiate with them. Or if you are, the negotiation should be complete and utter surrender on their part and rehabilitation. But let's be real. Shoot them. They're fascists. I'm making fascist-coded fascists here. The time for being nice and civil, that's if we're lucky. But usually, they won't give you that option. And if that's the case, you should be justified in taking what you need to remove them. I don't want to create a, well, you're just as bad as them for engaging energy in my TTRPG. I want to make that very clear that these guys chose this path. You don't have to. You can choose whatever path you want to deal with them. But as a general rule of thumb, most fascists act the way they do because they are desperately begging. Desperately begging to be treated as a threat. And my general rule of thumb is, if someone wants to be treated as a threat, and they threaten your existence, treat them as a threat. Don't downplay what they represent. Like, they are presenting themselves as a danger, okay. They've earned the right to be identified as a danger. So we're going to give these guys big, thick clothing, sort of mask their gear underneath. Here we go. We're going to sort of do the same here. So I like the idea that they have an undersuit under this thing. And maybe as like a throwback to their ancient civilization that they're sort of desperately aping or mimicking. They might have like a coat tail or something equivalent to it. Sort of gives us a little bit of like greatcoat vibes too. Which is good. We want that. We want that creepy motif, that visual motif that these guys are up to no good by default. Basically, my thought process when I was designing these guys is these are the final symptom of a galaxy that's been left fallow for far too long. That its rulers and its commanders haven't done what they've needed to actually preserve the peace. And now we reap the reward of their inadequacy. Okay. So these guys aren't going to be wearing nearly as advanced as the, like, dangerous gear that we see zero-out troopers. But also, unlike zero-out troopers, what we're making here are Imperial Vanguard. So again, as I mentioned, the Imperial, generally speaking, fascists. Not a good person. But they've been largely quiet up until now, playing in the shadows, working behind the scenes, infiltrating different aspects of colonial life on this edge of the galaxy. So we're talking the super corporations are starting to have members that are backed by or sympathetic to the Imperial, which is very much a course of real life where we realize that, yeah, it turns out rich people don't mind enslaving poor people. Just, general rule of thumb, they want to profit off of it. As long as they can profit off of it, they're good with it. Usually, an unfortunate twist of fate. Whereas, in terms of, like, the average citizen, many of them have seen their existences made significantly more difficult. And as a result, they're kind of, some of them anyway, are starting to become a little more open to the idea of maybe living in a society that is a little bit less open. There's plenty that don't believe that, but there's many who have been victimized, who see oppressing others as the best way to sort of get themselves where they want to be. I'm just sort of taking a look at some of the leg designs of some of these concept arts over here. You guys can't see these off to the right because I do want to give credit where credit is due. I'm drawing art from two different DICE properties. I should say one DICE property, two EA properties, I guess. So DICE's art for Battlefield 2042, which I know for a lot of folks, again, Battlefield 2042, that was the worst Battlefield. It was. But the art design was sick. So, you know, I gotta give it credit there. You don't need to like the game to admit that it's pretty. Alright? Or at least that its concept art is pretty. So I'm borrowing a little bit of elements from that. I'm also borrowing some slight elements from Titanfall as well. I like the idea of a lived-in galaxy. This is a place where people can absolutely wear the Star Trek-style jumpers. That's totally plausible. But also, many of them don't. That a lot of folks just sort of live their day-to-day. Same clothes, similar clothing like we have. Turns out baggy pants have been in fashion ever since farming really started. And so for folks who live on the frontier, many of whom do live a somewhat more arboreal existence, you see a lot of baggy clothing. And I want to keep that going as best as I can. And again, if anyone's got any questions, please feel free to ask. I know I don't have I wish I was still on Twitch for this. I don't know if they have a feature like that on YouTube. I need to do a little more digging. But the ability to, like, hey, you know, donate points to ask questions, that kind of thing. But you can feel free to ask. This is an open chat, after all. Alright, so we've got a pretty good silhouette here of what we want. I like the idea of some elements of their technology still being Imperial. So their van braces are still going to be very slick, very unnaturally clean. Parts of their helmet are. But then I also want to add little details as well, maybe. Like wiring, as an example, coming down off the back of the helmet. And probably a little rebreather down here, too. There we go. A little less clean on that. There we go. That works. That cleaned up the silhouette pretty well. Okay, let's start working on the line layers now. And we're going to save this. So again, I want these guys to be dangerous. Just rule of thumb. And as a result, their armor has to read as dangerous the whole way through. So we're going to have this sort of like jawbone point here, sort of reinforcement. Here we go. So we're getting some very basic shapes in here, nothing too crazy. I might change some of the design just a little bit. Usually I'll start by using extreme contrast because I can sort of play around with that as need be. This is just me doing like the very most basic form of outlining. I kind of like that. That looks pretty good so far. So let's take it and sort of pull it forward, keep it along that jawline. I kind of want to play with the shape of this, just a little bit. See how that looks. Okay. Not terrible. Not terrible. Alright. So we're going to have this sort of coming like that. Sort of pull a couple pieces. I usually recommend working along your musculature. Humans tend to have a very specific collarbone structure that's very easy to mimic. Just a couple of simple lines. Make some simple pectorals. And we can start by doing this, finding where joints need to appear. We're going to move down here a little bit and start working on our general lower body silhouette. So you have sort of this area here where your abdominals meet with the underside of your rib cage. See the basic silhouette of what our body looks like, our body plan looks like, but it's not quite there yet. So the van braces are pretty straightforward. I don't need to do too much to really pick those out. So since these guys, again, are a little more the mask-off part of this fascist empire, we don't need to make them as discreet. They can utilize a lot more advanced technology, but they kind of hide it under a facade of grim, gritty, kind of practical gear. So let's get some actual colors going here. So we got our line layer. Let's get our armor plating. Give me 75. General rule of thumb for me is that I use basic metal shapes and colors where I can for the Imperial. Despite all their incredibly high-minded aesthetic that they love to do, they still are bound by base metals and materials. They're still, after all, a bunch of Nazis operating on the edge of society to try not to be caught. So, and I keep using the word Nazi, and I do for a very good reason. These guys are, for all intents. Now, I think the term a lot of people would ask me to use instead would be authoritarians, because technically Nazism is a very specific kind of authoritarianism or fascism. But in many ways, these guys are coded to be that kind of fascist. So they are a fascistic empire. They're not just Nazis, they are a fascistic empire. They have their own ideology, their own highly toxic view of the galaxy. But at the end of the day, I'll be real, I want people to treat these guys like they would like to treat Nazis in the streets. Punch them. Punch them hard. Punch them over and over again. Trust me, it is in fact the correct call. So we got this. Now we're going to go with some basic gear underneath here. The actual helm itself is mostly a metal and plastic frame. Here we go. But yeah, I'm trying to do my best to avoid the Pulp Fiction issue of making these guys really, really, like, competent. They're dangerous. They should be treated as dangerous. They're also not a laughingstock. I want you to, when you encounter these guys, treat them as what they are. A threat to the existence of social order of any kind. They're not good. These guys are societal cancer. Treat them as such. Treat them as you would treat cancer. Destroy it very quickly. Speaking of awesome things that are happening in the real world. Looks like there's a new treatment for cancer that they're starting to really get somewhere with. It might be a true universal vaccine against cancer. That would be sick. I'm super on board for that. Just wanted to mention that. Just a little fun little detail. Alright, here we go. And by they, I mean pharmaceutical companies. I can't remember exactly which one. There's like a number of studies that are being tested on a particular drug at the moment. And I'm just really excited. I hope it pans out. It'd be nice to have some actually good news coming out of the science field right now. There's so much bad news, guys. So much bad news. Okay, so you've got this, like, sort of armored, articulated neck situation going, which is what I want. It's almost got, like, a gill-like structure on the sides, which I kind of like. Maybe it is actually gills. Maybe it's like some sort of osmotic gill that's designed to help with breathing. So the Imperial marries modern technology, or modern for the era in our setting, which again is a science fiction setting, so it is significantly advanced but recognizable for the most part, with this super advanced ancient technology. And as a result, you reach this very strange compromise between the two worlds. Here we go. And I'm just going to put this on here. We're going to get this little bit. Here we go. We're just going to put that in there. We're going to add a little bit more depth to this design, just a tad. And this is where we're going to start actually getting into some fun shapes. And the shadows that it would leave on things below. So the Imperial, in terms of like as a faction in Legacy, their whole thing is built around utilizing advanced technology and basically brute forcing their way into like to bully civilizations that can't compete with that. They do so in the most brute force way imaginable. They're literally just taking old technology and bootstrapping it to their needs. It's effective, but it's meant to be very almost childish in a way. Their understanding of this technology is limited. It's more advanced than what you see in, like, for most civilizations, but it's still very much not the apex of technology. Like, I'm sure they would love to say something like that. Surely we are the apex of advanced technology in the galaxy. No, you just stole a bunch of ancient shit and strapped guns to it. Call it a day. Okay, we're gonna add a darkening effect here. These guys are basically the equivalent of cavemen stealing AKs, more or less, and then threatening every other caveman with it. I guess if I had to choose a faction that closely mirrors them in, like, existing fiction, I'd probably say it would be... I think it's called, like, the Eclipse faction? Yeah, the Eclipse from Horizon Zero Dawn. Those guys are about as close, I think, as we're gonna get to the comparison of, like, a similar faction. Now let's take a look at our other dudes here. That'd be the Deep Cover Spec Ops. So you can see their helmets, they have this very sharp, angular design. I kind of want to still have that. So I need to angle those in from the sides, make it a little less smooth. Here we go. We're just going to straighten this out a little bit. And again, we're going for this sort of like very sharply angled butcher almost, like a cleaver. Alright, flip that over. Okay, so we've got this sharp cleaver helm situation going. Let's divide that again. And then we're just going to pull this straight down. Beautiful. So you got this very rough, hewn sort of look to it. Let's do a little more dividing, shall we? Let's make this 25. A little too complicated. Let's carve it down a little bit more. I will keep it smoother, I think. That was like an experiment, but it didn't pan out. Let's go with 4 eyes still, though. I do want that. 75. Okay, there we go. Looking good. Beautiful. And we just hew that to a nice sharp point. Nice. Cool. And we can sort of finish that sharpened angle off there. Nice. Cool. So we got this sharp angled helmet. It's almost reminiscent of like ancient knights, which again I feel is exactly what these sort of dorks would love. And again, I say this as a giant dork myself, but just not a fascist, which is far and away the worst part of it. We can handle being dorks in this household. No one has had an issue with being dorks. I'm a dork. That's okay. Being a fascist, though, is fucking unforgivable. We're just gonna take that, go into there, go into our armor section, just delete that. How's that look? Significantly sharper. That'll do. We're gonna smooth it out in a little bit, but it'll do for now. Hell, I'll smooth it out now. It's a very ruthlessly, like, rough angle. There we go. So we got ourselves a pretty good angle here. Let's get the rest of this gear going. We don't really need to cover all aspects of the undersuit. The bodysuit's probably going to be pretty straightforward. So I guess I'll put this on the flesh layer then. Here we go. Beautiful. So the armor is vaguely humanoid, meant to be worn by basically any humanoid member of the galaxy that can fit, with minor alterations possible. These guys draw not just from humanity, because in fact this is an Anazali-centric thing, though humans are definitely a large portion, well, I'd say a larger portion of them. But you still have Anazali, you have Oriname, you have Shrike, you have any of the different 8 species available, they're all present here. And I can practically hear some folks going like, wait, why would they agree to work within a fascist state that, you know, doesn't think all of them should have the same rights? And unfortunately, the truth of the matter is those who throw their lot in with fascists usually tend to buy into that sort of cultish behavior. And I wanted to make that very clear. Like, these guys don't have the answer to what ails you. They're selling their version of colloidal silver. And these are just the unfortunate schmucks who bought it. So we're going to have segmented plates, not unlike what the Anazali wear. I kind of want to make them shittier, though. So we are going to have it, like, certain elements of them will be a little bit less neat. Basically, someone went and hired the same folks the Anazali used to get all their cool bodysuits and was just like, make us a shitty mass-produced version of it. Which, for the record, flies in the face of the entire point of their existence, because each of those suits is a way for someone in a situation where they can't leave a spaceship to sort of actually have a little bit of, you know, diversity. Okay, so usually what I'll do for, like, the actual abdominal muscles is I'll have a set of coils that come from behind. These muscles are sort of the convenient thing that works for them. And they'll usually have like another set of liquid metal muscles acting like abdominals. There we go. That gives us a good harness. These muscles go all the way down to the bottom of the groin. So we've got that silhouette more or less handled, but now we get into the lower body, and I like the idea of just wearing pants over this. This super advanced Anazali bodysuit combined with modern technology, and they're like, nah, fuck it, put khakis over it. Which is a very practical affair, but also at the same time, I kind of like the idea that these guys just don't know how to handle this ancient technology. They're just not fully committed to it. It's going to be more like just a gold, kind of. Like a very beigey kind of gold. And it's going to come around. They're going to have a belt area. There we go. Cool. So we got ourselves our beige, kind of crappy khaki pants going on here. I'll do the same thing on the underside here, as I'm sure they have some kind of kneecap system. And it cuts down into here, same thing on the underside. They have this armor that runs over the top of their pants. Or probably pockets, probably like tactical pockets. Okay, so we've got that pretty much blocked out. Let's get the rest of our armor going now. I want to get a slightly, like, shinier shine on this, especially for the metal. I like the idea they sharpen the tines of these things. Feels like the kind of thing that, like, an overly edgy, like, neo-fascist would do. It's like, ooh, look how shiny and dangerous our helmets are. And I'm just sitting here like, I wouldn't want to sit in front of you in a moving vehicle. Car accidents with these guys would be a nightmare. Basically, it's Louis Vuitton clothing, right? It's kind of the deal. Where it's like, at first you see it and you're like, oh, that does look kind of cool. And then you take literally 5 seconds to think about the implications of the way the clothing looks. And you're like, oh, that would suck ass to wear. That would just not be a good thing. That would not be a good fit. No one would be comfortable in that. Ever. And the rule of thumb is, they weren't. As They Might Be Giants said, fascists have the outfits. But I don't care for the outfits. What I care about is music, and the communists have the music. Alright, so we've got this. I'm going to do the same thing here. We're going to angle this down. Here we go. And by doing this, it automatically gives us kind of a almost like a cleaver-esque sort of aesthetic to it. Yeah, that works. And we'll sharpen the edge of that too. Alright. So now we got that. We should start picking out the edges of this. Some bright whites. Basically wherever the light would hit. This will give us some nice venting effects. Cool. So we've got our general shape down. Let's lighten all this up a little bit. With an overlay set at 15%, I would say. As I adjust positioning on my hand. It's contrary to popular belief, even though I am everyone's favorite robot American, I do sweat, and that does mean my hands can get sweaty when I'm working in the warm. And it's been pretty warm here today, so... kind of like that idea, actually, that it just sort of continues on to here. It's not a bad look, actually. It gives us a very sharp, angled helm. Yeah, I like that. That looks pretty decent. Okay. There we go. Beautiful. Horrifying, but beautiful. So you got this very nice, like, metallic sort of sheen to that part. I want to do the same thing along the metal. And to do that, we're just going to take this and drag it the whole way along. Literally make it look like it's been sharpened, which it probably has been. They probably run their helmets through, like, industrial knife sharpeners. Why? Aesthetics. We get that keening edge as sharp as we can get it. Here we go. Nice. There we go. We can get a couple extra edges and stuff along here too. We're going to reduce the opacity on this to like a nice sort of 5%, scuff the armor up a little bit. Make it a little more battle-worn. There we go. Now we can put this at like 75, shrink it really far down. And we can get some fun like scratches and stuff. Usually along the areas where the most like contact was made. So your best bet is going to be along the actual head of the blade, where their head is, namely along their chin as well. Like that's where a lot of people set their armor down, and so there'll be a bunch of like scrapes and scuffs along it. And if we're only going to be focusing on the eyes and the helmet today, which is what it's looking like, because we're going to be jumping off stream in the next 8 minutes, I'm going to really zoom in on it. Let's get our background going. Okay, cool. So now we've got that. Let's get the same thing going for this. We're on our armor layer. Same thing around the undersides of where the chin is. Definitely a lot here. Here we go. Along this ridge I've started to craft in the plastic, where things would bump into it a lot. Here we go. Beautiful. All right. So we got that. Do the same thing around here. Where the light catches. I'm logged in for looking for the past hour. Good work so far. Thank you. I appreciate you, homie. Wanted to get something that looked sufficiently creepy and unnerving, but not like so far off the beaten path that it was wholly unrecognizable. So this is a normal. How are you doing today? As we just sort of put these patches in. And we're just going to slap that on. Here we go. It's been quiet? Good. I hope it's been quiet in a good way, at very least. I tend to equate quiet to good, where I sit. Because I'd much rather quiet and vibes than busy and chaotic, if I'm being honest. I'm a simple man. I like simple things. Drawing, playing video games, making models, rolling dice, just being a goober. I can do all that while things are quiet. Okay, cool. We can sort of take that down to the end here, take that down to the end here, and then we can carve out our neck plating here a little more cleanly. We do the same thing here. No 5-hour art streams for me? No, no, no. YouTube does not like 5-hour art streams. As much as I love 5-hour art streams, and I do, where I can lavish all sorts of attention and detail on it, YouTube's algorithm hates that. Part of the reason why I'm pushing my my Patreon as hard as I am. Because if I'm being honest with you guys, it's a lot easier for me to create the art I want to create when I don't have the algorithm breathing down my neck going, "You're not complying to the algorithm." And me sitting here going, "Yes, I know, because I'm making what I want to make, you weird thing. Why do you keep pushing everyone to go watch Mr. Beast? His videos are okay. They're fine, I guess. I would say come at me, Mr. Beast, but I'm a tiny dude with like less than 100 viewers and less than 100 subscribers on YouTube. I am not in the same weight class. But I'd like to be. But I'm also not going to throw that much, like, weight behind it. My purpose here is to have fun and create the things I want to create. Not fleece more money out of kids and their parents. Same reason why I'm probably not going to draw much 40k content on here. I know there's a couple of you guys out there who follow my videos and watch my stuff, and you're like, why don't you draw 40k? Simply put, guys, I value my soul too much, and Games Workshop has lost it long ago. And I refuse to peddle plastic crack to kids that isn't of at least sufficient value in my mind. That's really the trick. It's all plastic crack, but, like, you know, why would I be encouraging kids to buy the premium plastic crack when they can go to their neighborhood game store and buy the quality plastic crack they can get from there? You know? We're going online, encouraging them just to buy directly from the actual creators. Okay, so we've got our helmet more or less done. Alright, I'm gonna go and slap a final little bit of, like, lighting on this. Just a hair. Here we go. Alright, nice. Not bad, not bad. And then we're going to add some eyes fast, because I can do that. So we're going to do this as a color. So I feel like I did like the eyes set really far back before. And I did that on the deep cover guys. They're like really far back. That's because their eyes are actually like back here. Like their head sort of comes forward like almost like a dolphin's melon. So that's actually where their eyes would be if they had them, but they echolocate. These guys, on the other hand, have eyes further forward. So I feel like the eyes would be set a little further towards the front. We're going for that sick-ass Battlestar Galactica style glowing eye thing here. By your command. I haven't seen Battlestar Galactica in an age. I should watch it when I'm feeling emotionally not compromised. That show is very emotionally compromising. It is... Woohoo, boy. That show hits. That show's got weight. It's got hands. Actually, thinking about it, I should probably finish Andor first. I've been really enjoying it. Alright, let's get our red 75. We're going to do this as an overlay. We'll actually do this as a hard light. Oh no, vivid light. Vivid light. Vivid light will do. Then we're going to go back on this and hit it up in a minute with a slightly lighter red to show the actual, like, changing of how the light sits. Let's put that as a normal here. Unfortunately, when you're dealing with, like, very subtle accented shades of a color, using an actual light effect does not work very well for that. There we go. That feels like a good place for us to end off. I'm looking forward to seeing my players stumble across these guys. This is going to be a blast. So to everybody out there, thank you so much for tuning in today. I appreciate you. AZ, thanks so much for the lurk. To everyone who's currently watching, thank you guys. If you want to support the channel, you can find me on patreon.com/TheLastOmnitect. All one word. That's your best place to support me, if we're being honest. Likewise, also, if you are a member of the Patreon already, Ampersand, Atlas, Heinrich, or my incredible Tier 2 patrons, Necronomius and Souls Rolls, thank you guys so much. You are the finances to my bank account, and the only reason I can continue doing what I'm doing here. So thank you very much. I'll be running this game, Legacy First Flight, actually on the weekend. So if anyone is interested, you can go to my channel description and find it there. I am at, and I just want to make sure I got this right, youtube.com/@unicornhead Studios. You can go there and watch that this weekend. So, with that, thank you guys so much, and I'll see you out there, Voyagers.